There are over 60 million Hispanics in the United States. Through Bienvenido, I have the privilege of meeting members of the Hispanic community that have inspiring stories. They are trailblazers, giants in civic leadership, and serve as pillars that lift cultural prosperity over our community. Join me here on The Abraham Enriquez Show. Hola amigos, I want to thank you for joining me today, and I'm excited because I get to have a conversation with a big leader and giant in trailblazing in the Hispanic community, not only in the state of Texas, but all throughout the country. And today I have the honor of sitting down with my good friend, Mr. Rick Figueroa. Rick, thank you so much for being here. I know you're pretty busy, so this means a lot.
It's my honor, Abraham. Glad to thank you for all the work you do and the grassroots efforts. We appreciate that.
Thank you. So actually, I want to start off by mentioning and highlighting the fact that back in 2019, I had this idea of Bienvenido, right? And I had almost no political connections. And I got to meet you through, several family friends and political events that I went to. And I spoke to you about Bienvenido, and immediately you, without a doubt, really became the reason why we had our very first event in Houston with Congressman Dan Crenshaw. And that really was the beginning of what Bienvenido is today. And now we have Bienvenido in states like we just finished out helping in Georgia, Arizona, Texas, and Florida. And that all started because you decided to help us out in Houston and have continued that support to today. So thank you so much for investing your mentorship and just your guidance to Bienvenido. I really do appreciate that. But I want to talk, I guess first start with, in 2016, you became one of the first and very vocal supporters of President Trump, right? In 2016, there wasn't many Hispanics willing to come out in support of the president. That actually got you to be one of the top advisors to the president's campaign. And so you've had several conversations with the president. You helped him out throughout 2016, but carried that torch all the way to 2020, became another, again, an advisor to his campaign. I guess what I want to ask you is what drew you to President Trump in 2016 and again in 2020?
2016 sounds like a lifetime ago. It just, and I remember distinctly. So when I got the phone call, the RNC had started to think about putting together a coalition of Hispanics. It was very tumultuous. It was very tough to see what direction this thing was going. Mm-hmm. As you well know, Mr. Trump back then, it wasn't President Trump. He had a lot of challenges in regards to Hispanics, and not only were they not willing to be on his commission or his campaign, they were going against him.
Yeah.
So there was an active movement of conservative Hispanics that were going against him. Rubio, Cruz were options that they were looking at. And so when the campaign called, what I did is I told him, look, I'm willing to have a conversation with Mr. Trump. And I went up to New York and I had a very great conversation. There was about 12 of us that were there. I got to lead off the conversation. And I told the president, well, it was not the president, but I told Mr. Trump, I said, look, if you're going to engage Hispanics, honor and respect are the two key words that you have to have.
Honor and respect. Yeah.
Honor and respect. Honor and respect. Yeah. And so he listened. And how I know he listened is because he went to Mexico City to visit Peña Nieto, right?
Yeah.
And in his speech, he told President of Mexico, he said, it's an honor to be here in Mexico, and I respect the family values and the religious beliefs associated with Mexican people. So he was listening to what we were saying. What I specifically, and it's funny because my wife looked at me and she goes, that sounds like something you said. And I said, I did say that. And so, but it was a great honor to be part of that. And he's a principled man, but he's not. He's a very straightforward. And I as a wealth manager, I deal with a lot of CEOs, and CEOs are very metric driven, right? They measure the success. If you can't measure it, how do you know you succeed? Mm-hmm. And so he was always about trying to move needles, and that really attracted to him. And other politicians were about nebulous policies, nebulous ideas. He was always about let's make these numbers work. And he said we're going to have 4% growth, and people laughed at him. And we have 4% growth, right?
Yeah.
He said we're going to renegotiate NAFTA. People laughed at him. We renegotiated NAFTA. We're going to have open up the Arctic. I mean, he was very much, these are very measurable things that I'm going to do. And he did it. And so it was very exciting back then.
Yeah. And so I think what a lot of people don't understand about Hispanic support for the president, right, is that the Latino vote that turned out for President Trump, that didn't surprise me, because our values have always been individual liberty and self-governance, right? And we saw that with President Reagan. I think that was really the birth of the Hispanic involvement within the Republican Party. Kind of went dormant. A lot of Hispanics went apolitical for a while, and then President Trump really enlightened that movement and really showcased those values. So for people like me to see people like you get involved in the campaign, that wasn't a surprise to me, because Hispanics are conservative by nature, right? That inherently, that those are the values that we hold: individual liberty, self-governance, the ability to, be family oriented, but also understand that it's important to rely on moral and ethical values. Speaking of that, what kind of values have shaped your childhood and that you carry on to now? Because you have a great family, really hard worker. You're really paving the way for a lot of other young Hispanics and just young entrepreneurs as well in Texas to look up to and be able to say, like, okay, he did it, therefore I can do it as well. So what are some of the values that you grew up with that you can look back and say, like, those helped me get to what I'm doing today?
Right. Well, a couple of things. One is Reagan's famous quote is, Hispanics are Republicans, they just don't know it. Remember that? And I always tell people in every speech, Reagan was wrong. He was completely wrong. Republicans are Hispanic. They don't know it.
Wow.
And that's a big difference, right?
Huge
it's a difference when I tell you, Abraham, you're like me. That's one statement. Well, when I say, Abraham, I'm like you, that's a whole different statement. And too many times Republicans have gone out to try to convert Hispanics. You don't have to convert Hispanics. You just have to recognize that as Republicans, you are like Hispanics. And that's important. That delineation is everything. Growing up, my mother, I was youngest of 8, and she worked 36 years in the hospital kitchen. Much like your mother, she's a great mentor. And she, I've met presidents, senators, CEOs, and nobody compares to her. And nobody ever will. She's about 4 foot Latina woman, 93 years old. And she says COVID and tequila and aloe vera cure COVID. That's her theory.
Love it.
And so, wonderful lady, but she had 7 rules, right? And being the youngest of 8, I always tell her it took her 8 times to get it right, but she finally got it right. And I said, look, number 1, her rule is, you pray every day, right? Every day, right? You get your butt out of bed and go to work, okay? You don't expect anybody to help you. You help others when you can, right? You find a good woman, you marry her, you raise godly kids, right? And you honor God in everything you do. That's it. 7 rules. 7 simple rules. She wasn't trying to turn me into a Republican. Mm-hmm. She was trying to get a boy in the barrio to survive, to be a man. And those rules were her rules to guide me through. And I would tell you, whether you're a Democrat, Republican, Independent, Socialist, Communist, whatever you may think you are, those 7 rules are applicable in any consequence from a parent to a child. Mm-hmm. Which one of those 7 rules would you not want your child to embolden and embrace? And so those principles are they're so stationary, and people seem that one of the naivety of our world is we think that principles can be fluid, right? I think the worst thing that's ever happened to us, the God of relativism has taken over. What's right for you is right for you. What's right for me is right for me.
Wow.
That's wrong. Right? Mm-hmm. Because we can sit here in this room and we can look and have a conversation and go, hey, we have voted and that's North, right? Mm-hmm. We can vote and have a celebration, balloons. We can have everybody, hey, this is North. Everybody be all happy about it. North doesn't give a damn what we think. That's North.
Yeah.
It's not a relative. It's not an opinion. It's a fact. There are principles that are facts. They're not opinion. You want your kid to work hard. You want them to be independent. You want them to make sure they help others when they can. You want them to have a good family. There's a sequence of things. And so I think that it's important as Hispanics, we don't try to change ourselves. We just try to highlight and concentrate those principles that have carried us so far.
I absolutely love that. And I think if more Republicans who maybe weren't Hispanic but need that Hispanic vote to be elected or reelected, challenge the status quo and say, like, no, we don't want you to be a Republican. We want the Republican Party to embrace you as you are, because Republican values are Hispanic values. And I think Hispanics now that have been apolitical and dormant are now starting to see that leftist political leaders ask for an inch, but they really take a mile, right? We want things simple and clear, right? We want to know what we're voting for. Don't want anything, messy or kind of sketchy in that fact. And then when Democrats start talking, this very charismatic language of, well, we want equal opportunity. We want everyone to feel, protected and safe. And then you get things like just the other day, Speaker Nancy Pelosi said that they're no longer allowing terms like father, mother, son, daughter on the House floor. Those are attacks on the Hispanic community, because family, and especially family titles, are what really is the glue to the values, right? You go to Hispanic homes, and most Hispanic homes are multi-generational, right? There's, they have very tight knit life with their grandma, their aunt, their uncle. So for legislation that passes in their community to say, no, we don't want to refer to your grandma, we don't want to refer to your dad, we want to refer to everyone as equal, that doesn't sit well with Hispanics. And I think now we're starting to see the challenging point of Hispanics saying, okay, we didn't sign up for this, right? So I guess,
but I want to make sure this is important. That's this gender neutral concept is not an attack on the Hispanic community. It's a spiritual attack on God's institutions, right? I'm a man of faith, and there may be not many people out there left to it, but my faith, there's only two institutions that God created, only two, the family and the church, right? And as my faith is that if you want to destroy our faith, you destroy the family, you destroy the church, and you basically eliminate us to be able to work. And so it's an active war. I mean, I had this discussion the other night with a good friend, and we were talking about, this isn't a political war. This is a spiritual battle that we're hitting, right? And politics is the facade of it. Don't get me wrong, through policy, but the warfare, the destruction of a gender neutral conversation, or the idea of gender neutral conversation, is part of the destruction of our spiritual faith in this country. It's another step in that direction, and that's important, because I think the guardians, or the last line of defense for that, is the Hispanic community, because I think you look at the fatherless homes in the African American community, 70%. Wow. Right. And so, as a chairman for TDR, you sit there and I look at prisoner reentry, and 99% of the people that are in front of me grew up without a father when they're coming back out of prison. I wonder what the common factor is, right? Yeah. You take the father out of the home, or you neutralize the father, right? And that's important, because that gender, and I know you didn't want to go down this lane a little bit, but I think it's important, because I've had the privilege of raising 2 daughters and 2 sons, okay? 25 years of marriage. As much as as good of my father as I am, I could never teach my daughters how to be a woman. Couldn't do it, right? But their mama could never love them like their daddy loves them. I'm their daddy, right? They're my daughters, right? And I treat them different. As much and wonderful as my wife is as a mother, she could never teach my boys how to be a man. I can do it. But I could never love those boys the way their mama loves them, And so you can tell me all day long that, that 2 women, 2 men, 1 single parent. And I grew up in a single parent home. I grew up with no dad. So, but there's consequences for those actions, right? There are consequences. And so I was in a hole that I had to get out of. And it was attributed to, now I don't indict my mother for that, but let's face the facts. When there's not a father in the home, there's a vacuum, and it doesn't get filled. Well, it does get filled. It gets filled by social media, pornography, drugs, alcohol, abuse, anger. There's a lot of things that fill that hole, right? And so, this gender neutral idea is the dissolving of the family unit, which is an institution created by our faith. And I think that we pass by that as, oh, there go those liberals again. They're just wanting to, let's just give them another political correct. No, there's an active surgical strike to our faith. And the dismantling of an institution as important as our family would be catastrophic. And this gender neutral conversation is that. One of the reasons I started my firm, right? One of the reasons, the straw, is I got an email in January from my firm. It's a Swiss company. And it said, I am now authorized to go back to my HR file and decide whether I want to be declared a woman or a man. Right. And I went to my director, and I know you didn't, but it's important. I went to my director and I said, let me get this straight. A year and a half ago, I wanted to do a Bible study, a Christian advisors Bible study. And you told me I couldn't meet on campus. You told me I had to go. So I had to go to La Madeleine with a group of Christian advisors, because you weren't going to allow us to meet on our office. But if I want to wear a dress, lipstick, and use the women's restroom, you're going to give me a month of celebration on the company website?
Wow.
What alternate universe did we arrive in, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yet, that is where we are. And so, this is important. And I'm not sitting there saying let's go out and persecute people who are challenged with their sexuality. But I'm saying do not dismiss the power and the stability and the essential nucleus of the family in our society. Because if we do, it'll all unravel.
I think most people blame the liberal left for saturating that so much, but I don't really blame them because that's their intention. I think most blame here is to the church. You saw
the second
in the
institution.
2020 election and even in some of these runoff races, the church was really quiet.
Yep.
Did not want to get involved because they were too scared of being politically incorrect or losing members, when in reality that your call is to share the truth, right? And lead your congregation to the truth. You don't have to tell them who to vote for. You've got to tell them what values, they stand. I am shocked and I'm stunned that a reverend that is a Marxist praises Marxism and embraces socialist ideas and preaches pro-abortion message behind the pulpit won a Senate election in Georgia. I am just to today. I'm still not understanding what went wrong. I think a lot of people. What would you say to people that say there's no point to going out and voting because they already know, right? It's rigged. It's not worth it. What would you say to those people who are sitting on the sidelines and saying my participation isn't needed?
So the most powerful weapon in warfare is confusion. A hurt enemy can still hurt you. A scared enemy will fight for its life. But a confused enemy doesn't have a chance. They don't know who leads. They don't know which way's up, right? People have tactically, and I say people because people a lot of use the left, but there are socialists, communists, there are a lot of people from various angles who have the general idea of destruction of our country, and they have actively installed confusion upon the people, and which has neutralized them, right? And they're so and the information highway, super highway, has been just an agitator to it, right? You don't know what to believe, you don't know what to read, you don't know who's coming from where. The taintedness of information, right? You used to believe 20, 30 years ago that once it was in print, there was some fact to it.
Yeah.
Right? And now there's a joke says it was on the internet, so it has to be true. But yet if you ask 100 people, 99% of them get their information from the internet. Yeah. Wait a minute, how can the joke that if it's on the internet can be true, so be so funny, but yet 99% of the people get their information from the internet? So what they do is they've just fed into the system that they've made fun of because so this confusion is what's caused this idea that neutralizes people. So my statement to people who are seeking some sort of north, to follow the analogy, that they continue to seek north. The truth, if you will, right, will have a certain aroma, will have a certain feeling, right? And it's not necessarily something you like. Some of the best truths I've been told have been things I didn't like, right? Let's just be honest, right? If you have something on your face, don't you want somebody to tell you the truth, right? And so we are sitting here where people are not looking themselves in the mirror and they're like saying, so I would tell them to continue to seek it and to make sense. Does it make sense? I gave you 7 rules, right? Very quickly, I spouted 7 rules and they make sense, right? It resonates with people. When I've given speeches all over the United States, right? And I bring those rules out and everybody looks at me like I invented water. I'm like, I didn't invent water. Those are 7 rules. Those were given to me by a woman who had a junior high education from Mexico who washed dishes in a kitchen. Right? Yeah. So it wasn't, a MIT graduate or Harvard graduate giving me. These are rules that she knew that had to be followed in order to have a successful life. So that there is truth out there. Don't give up on it. Continue to push forward and don't allow yourself to be confused because you're lazy or you decide to just trust information that you shouldn't trust.
That's great. I think confusion, and I never heard it phrased that way. It's confusion is what,
The
you
most
know,
powerful weapon.
and that's good. I think right now a lot of conservative leaders are confused, for lack of better
Yeah.
words. Shifting gears a little bit, we did a poll. We polled 70,000 Hispanic voters from all, political aisle, both left and right. And we asked them, what are the top issues that you care about? And I thought, well, many people think, oh, Hispanics care about immigration, crisis at the border, things like that. Coming at number one, overwhelmingly, just by far, and I was a little bit surprised, but not really, was the Second Amendment and the right to bear arms. That is a value and a constitutional right that both conservative Republicans and conservative Democrats say we need to preserve the Second Amendment. You sit on the NRA board. What do you think about that? Does that surprise you? What do we do with that information, and how can we ensure that the Second Amendment isn't a right or left issue? It's a constitutional right.
So, I grew up as a day laborer, and I have my own ranch. I hunt with my boys. I'm not an avid gun collector, but I enjoy going hunting with my boys. I just went hunting a couple weeks ago, and I enjoy the ability. I live on a ranch to defend myself, right? I mean, people would say, "Well, the police will come." I'm saying, well, just just go back and look at all these activists, these cities that were attacked, and sections of cities were taken over by anarchists.
Yeah.
Right. The police weren't going. You couldn't call 911. So this isn't a theory that is some hard right, end of world Armageddon. This actually has taken place where sections of our cities have been captured by anarchists, and 911 wasn't going to come help you. Right. Where people were actually being beaten and nobody was calling the police, right? Where people were trying to establish their own little self-governments, right? And so the ability for you to be your last line, ultimately the safety, security, and the welfare of my family resides on me. I am the father. It resides on me. And it's not on the police. It's not on the government. I don't depend on the police and the government. It's the protection of my family resides on me. Not just because of protecting intruders, but to provide food, shelter, clothing, right? It falls on my shoulders, right? I will not abdicate that responsibility to some entity that is being molded by somebody who has no physical vested interest in my family, right? I will make it sure. And so the Second Amendment is about that belief. The Second Amendment is about that belief and one other, the ability to speak. My love for the second is because I love the first.
Yeah.
You throw the second away, you lose the first. Make no mistake about it, right? So those two reasons, the ability to defend my family and be the last line, ultimately falls on my shoulder. If anything happens, it's on me. My family, my 4 kids, my wife, it falls solely on me and my ability to do that. And any means necessary, that's important. But the second one is to be able to speak here, speak my mind, and to make sure that I don't get, muted or dismissed or pushed aside. And that is so critical. When I was approached, it's a very long story about how I got involved with the NRA. It's a great story, and I'm not sure the show has enough time, but they have been so active in making sure that the Hispanic voice is on there. And I remember distinctly telling Wayne and the leaders of the NRA, I said, look, I go hunting in South Texas. I can't pick up a rock without hitting a Latino with a gun in deer season, right? I'm serious, right? Every cantina, every cafe in the morning is ready. A bunch of Latinos when we went out there and we're going to go hunt and I said, but they don't know what the NRA is.
Yeah.
I have no idea who the NRA is. I said, we have got to awaken that this is the organization there to protect the oldest civil rights organization, by the way, in the United States. For Black people to be able to bear arms was one of the primary principles of the NRA. But the idea is we sit here with an organization that is so precious to our country, and people who love their guns and love the ability to protect themselves, and their two aren't connected. So it was pivotal that I get on the board, and I fought hard to get elected and I was elected, and I have a position there, and they have a voice. And believe me, there's two things, right, that I would say they're very powerful once you get a seat at the table, right? Those two things that make you the most honest broker in the world. Number one is the freedom to be wrong, right? When I have a seat at the table, I'd always give myself permission to be wrong, because when you're fearful of being wrong, you don't say something. So I'm okay with it. The second is the freedom to be fired. I'm okay. If you don't want me to come back, fine. That's fine with me, right? But those two freedoms ensure that I can sit at a table and speak freely from my perspective and my paradigm, which I believe is missing in the Second Amendment conversation. And I think the NRA and the country needs the Hispanics to awaken that this precious institution, the NRA, is the guardian of that. And they don't have that. They have no idea about that. No. So the convention is going to be in Houston in May. Mm-hmm. And so I'd love to have you as my guest.
Love to be there.
I am going to be hard and fast pushing to have as many Hispanics there to awaken them to how wonderful the NRA can do and protect them and be a beneficial membership on their behalf.
That's great. I mean, just talking about Texas in the 2018 elections with Beto O'Rourke, embrace the Hispanic community like no other candidate, right? Hispanics were just in love with this idea of someone named Beto going out. I mean, he would go to quinceañeras, he would go to taco truck. Like, he knew how to play that game. And when we would talk to them about, what did you know he stands for? Confiscation of your firearms. Shocked. Couldn't believe it. Because that's something that, I mean, he was very vocal about it, but not to the Hispanic community. So besides, other than immigration, crisis at the border, and even healthcare, the Second Amendment is the backbone to Hispanic values. And when people say, why do Hispanics care so much about the Second Amendment? Well, because the second issue that, we polled and came up as something that Hispanics cared about was job opportunity. So free markets, capitalism, that's the Hispanic best friend value, right? Hispanics know that if a country wants to head to socialism, the one thing that the government needs to do is take their firearms.
Right.
You cannot have a socialist country without first unarming your people. I love Mexico. Beautiful country. I visit every year. I have friends and family there. But it is really sad to see the level of crime that has been allowed. And in 1971, I believe, Mexico passed an amendment to their constitution, which basically makes it impossible for a civilian to carry, right? And you would think, and there's only one gun store in Mexico. You would think, okay, with that level of, security and only one, firearm store, you would think that the crime would not be, as heavy, but it is. It's actually really devastating to see how terrible Mexico has become because of the lack of the protection that civilians don't have to protect themselves. I think over 100,000, incidents with people not being able to defend themselves happened just in the last decade in Mexico. And I think when you speak to people in America about what it means to have gun reform, I mean, just take a close look at Mexico. If you want that, it's going to creep along the border and come into America. I love that I live in Texas because the Second Amendment is something you don't mess with Second Amendment in Texas. But I fear that the idea of gun reform is starting to become this comfortable table talk conversation in most of these Hispanic, homes. And what I fear is that most Hispanics come, in future elections will be okay with, okay, gun reform doesn't mean they're going to want to take my guns away, right? But as we know, they don't stop at just gun reform. They stop at whatever they get, until they get what they want. So how important is it to preserve the Second Amendment? And fighting socialism really equals preserving the right to bear arms.
So Beto O'Rourke is everything wrong with the state. I couldn't. He is a pseudo Latino who tried to woo Hispanics on some charismatic trip of connectivity, which is our fault because we have failed to put truth out there as a community. And he is pardon my French, but he's just a bastardized version of what Latinos would want to see, right? And he created this but until he came out and overtly said, yeah, we're going to take your ARs, right? Yeah, we're going to come after and get. But if he wouldn't have done that, If he would have played it down a little bit,
Yeah.
he could have faked it enough to really give.
Well,
Senator Cruz
he did. He started off by saying, "I don't want to take your guns away.
Right.
I just want more background check." Which, by the way, we have that. We have that.
Right.
And it wasn't until he ran for president where Hispanics were like, "Wait, we were almost duped by this guy."
He is. But it's on us.
It is.
Why? Because some Anglo has been called by Beto. He thinks he's Hispanic, or he grew up in El Paso. He's an icon for what's wrong with our country, because we seem to cling to the cotton candy as opposed to the true beef or the true meat of the subjects, right? We don't have representation. I mean, we talked about that before the program. It's our bench is light in the Hispanic community, right? I mean, if you think about Hispanic in politics, most people will gravitate to Puerto Rican and Cubans by default. They don't think about Mexicanos, right?
Yeah.
And so that's on us a little bit, right? That's on us. And maybe we're too busy working. Maybe we're too busy doing our family. Maybe we're too busy doing whatever it is we're too busy doing. But the consequences of that vacuum creates characters like Beto O'Rourke, creates pseudo-Hispanics that come out with some sort of linguistic talent and say, hey, I'm at Whataburger, te amo, right? Yeah, okay, fine, right. Whatever that means, right?
Yeah.
And so we have to awaken, and I hope your program awakens and shakes this young group of Latinos and says, no, we're going to own our own community, and we're going to own it well, and we're going to put people out there, and we're going to force the power brokers to push candidates that truly represent the meat of our policies, not some pseudo wannabe lookalike, the Almo from Whataburger, and I'm doing some kind of Instagram pro you.
Yeah.
I mean, really, right? That's where we are. And so I think I love the fact that Beto came out, because I think it was an alarm bell that we needed to hear, because we would have slept through it if we wouldn't have. Okay,
I mean, we don't have the luxury anymore to say, oh, well, it's just the liberals being liberals again. I think when he announced he was going to run for president, I think all America was like, oh, this is going to be dangerous, because of what we saw what he almost did in Texas. But the second he came against the Second Amendment, you just saw, I mean, I don't think he even lasted that long right after that, because Democrats you just don't do that.
Well, let me depress you a little bit. Kamala Harris is worse.
Yeah.
She's the vice president.
She's dangerous. Well, Joe Biden already came out and said that Beto O'Rourke is going to be his advisor on gun reform.
So if you don't know, the NRA is that firewall.
Yeah.
Right. And so how the NRA approaches the subject, how aggressively they do it, if it exists in the next 10 years, as I told Wayne, I said, if you don't actively recruit Hispanics, the NRA won't exist in 10 years.
Yeah.
Their membership, we have to be active. And it's not about evangelizing them. It goes back to that problem. Yeah. Like Reagan said, Hispanics are Republicans. No. NRA, you are Hispanic by nature, because you believe in defending your family. You believe in going out and providing for your family. These are principles through firearms. Yeah. Right. And that's what the NRA is about. And it's about education. It's about competition. It's about, supporting the family through firearms. That's what it's about. Mm-hmm. And so guess what, NRA? You're Hispanic. You just didn't know it.
Well, that's a lot of, I mean, I love everything that you just said, but that's a lot of pressure on you, a little healthy pressure on you, because you are that leading Hispanic voice in the Second Amendment. And, my parents they are strong Republicans. All right. Like you shoot them in the foot, they'll find a way to make it out to the polls on election day. Like they will go in person. But something that they will always vote for is obviously my parents are unapologetically pro-life, and they care about free markets and capitalism. But something that they really take to heart is the Second Amendment. If a candidate is not endorsed by the NRA, forget about it. Right? That's how much power the Second Amendment support has. And I think we need, as Hispanics who are like, well, I don't know where I lean, I don't know. Well, we need to look up to people like you. Okay, who has Rick endorsed? Because he understands those. I agree with the 7 principles that Rick stands for. So whoever he endorses, I want to go to that. Because if we get on social media and we vote for who MSNBC, CNN, or our favorite YouTuber tells us who to vote for, we're going to be in a little bit of a pickle. Yes. But we get behind people like you who are experienced, have a wealth of knowledge in these things. It's like, okay, I'm putting my trust. That's why I say you have a lot of healthy pressure behind you because you have kind of this whole generation of new voters. I mean, the Hispanic vote is it's the youngest, one of the youngest ethnic voting blocks growing in Texas. I think here pretty soon, if not now, I think we're going to be the largest voting block in the state of Texas. That can be a really great thing for Texas. It can be a very dangerous thing for Texas if organizations like the NRA, the RNC don't start accepting the Mexican American vote as it is. And transitioning just a little bit, we were both at the White House for the celebration of the Hispanic Prosperity Committee and conference. And our good friend Bob Unanue from Goya goes up and, says that the Hispanics are blessed to have President Trump. Immediately, you see this boycott from the liberal left, but honestly, surprisingly, from Hispanics boycotting a family-owned, hardworking Hispanic business because of their support for the president. I think that's a very dangerous place to be at when an entrepreneur can't voice their support for someone who has really paved the way for entrepreneurship in America. Liberals cry out and say, well, we need equal opportunity. In the past 4 years, we've seen the lowest unemployment rate for African Americans, Hispanic, Asians, and women. 1 million Latinas enter the workforce. Hispanic businesses in the state of Texas are flourishing. I think the only discrimination that we really have is people being able to voice their support for a conservative candidate. You can support liberals and you're going to be okay. But the second you come out in support of a Republican or conservative political leader, boycotted. How dangerous is it to feed into that as a Hispanic entrepreneur?
So you barely scratched the surface of Bob's story. I want you to know that when he came out, I met him at the Trump Hotel the day after, and we were having breakfast, and I just happened to be there. I didn't know him prior to that, and he lives in Houston, and I said, I walked up to him, and all these TVs had his face on it, right? He was being hammered by people, and Eva Longoria, all these little Latinas that think they're all that, and super nuts are all, boycott. And so I walked over and I said, and I looked at him and said, I will stand with you. I will be here. I will make my Rolodex available to you, Bob. You will not. Too many times Latinos have been attacked and we've left them out there to the wolves.
Yeah.
African Americans get attacked and the wagons get circled. Latinos get attacked and it's crickets. I said, I will be there with you. And I made my Rolodex and we went through it. He was not only attacked, but his own family. Within the Goya family, he was attacked.
I didn't know
so, that. So the sausage is being made is a very ugly process. And so people don't realize the sacrifice that he did in the warfare. And if you ask Bob, he'll tell you it was because he used the word blessed that agitated.
Yeah.
And it was a spiritual warfare. And he stepped himself out there, and he and I have done many things together. I had lunch with him a couple of days ago or yesterday. He talked about his sales were up 35% after this boycott started up, right? So it came back a boomerang. And not only that, his response during COVID was unprecedented. I mean, that family or that company pushed forward to make sure families had food on the table, right? And his employees, and he turned the profits back to his employees. Amazing story. He's a great entrepreneur, but that just tells you the antagonistic nature by which politics infuses into business, right?
Yeah.
And I'm okay, but it is without question, it is a hijacking of, right? Right now we have, the Capitol being, stormed, right? But I don't remember these politicians protesting when people couldn't eat dinner without being attacked by Antifa or Black Lives Matter, right? But Black Lives Matter can use hostile tactics to prove their point. And they can have the mayors of cities walking with them, but activists who are sitting there on the right, they're anarchists, and so you see the double standard, right? The ability for people to change the narrative so quickly within days, right? You go from pacifist protesters because they're Black Lives Matters to anarchists if they're right-wing Trump supporters.
Yeah,
that's the two narratives at CNN and all these things. Those little words mean everything, and that's how they so we were at war, and I always tell there's a story I always tell when I was coaching Little League football for my boys, right? They have a theatrics, and one time we didn't have too many reserve players, and so I had to really play a lot of them. and they were like, Coach, I'm hurt. Coach, my arm's broke. Coach, and they'd make up something to get out of the game, right? And I'd grab them by their little shoulder pads. I'd look them in the eye. I said, son, I'm going to put you back in that game. All right. I don't have a choice. But two things are going to happen. And only two things. Either you're going to hit somebody or somebody's going to hit you. And in politics, you're in the game. Either politics is affecting you or you're affecting politics. But that's the only two things that are happening.
It's good.
So I don't believe that I'm going to stand by and allow politics to affect me. I'm going to affect it. Right. And so Hispanics need to be notified that they're getting their butts kicked staying on the sidelines. You're not neutral. You're getting your butt kicked. Something is affecting you. Your right to bear arms, the taxes, the regulations, whether you're third term abortions. Right. You talked earlier about the church and how it's been neutered. To this day, Pelosi, who was a third term abortion, advocate, calls herself Catholic. Right. And so how do you reconcile that? Because she thumbs her nose at the church. They're inconsequential. I'll tell the church when they need to show up or not versus the church telling me how to live. Right. And so we have to notify Hispanics, the people in general. I think this isn't about Hispanics. It is, but it isn't. That if they don't awaken, the consequences will befall them. There is no neutral.
Absolutely.
There is no, and I tell them when I have a conversation with people about politics or anything, well, I just like to be neutral. I say, well, then you're a fool. Because neutrality means that you'll go whatever and do whatever everybody else says.
Yeah.
I said, lack of engagement means that you're going to get killed. You're going to get crushed. And so that's important. And so I believe you mentioned the pressure, but I have the honor. God has blessed me with the honor to have resources and the time to be able to do this. I could be working, but I'm here in Dallas for the NRA board meeting to take 2 days off my work, right? Costing me money. But I have to because I don't want politics to affect me. And I'll tell you one embarrassing story that makes me think about this because I was in junior high playing football, right? And I was on the B team. I started on the B team. I remember at junior high, the A team, B team, right? And we had a player that was sick and he couldn't play. So they stuck me on the A team, but I was reserve, right? And it was just embarrassing because I sat on the sidelines the whole game.
Yeah.
Right. So at the very end of the game, I can't believe I'm confessing this to you. So your thousands of listeners are going to know. At the very game, I went to the end of the bench and I stuck my knee in the ground and I rubbed my knee in the dirt. And I stuck my other knee in the ground. I rubbed my knee in the dirt because my uniform was completely clean.
Uh-huh.
Right. So I wanted some dirt on my uniform that it didn't look like I sat on the sideline. So that's what you do when you sit on the sidelines and pretend like you're some activist and you're watching this from CNN or Fox News and yelling at the TV. All you're doing is you're rubbing your knee in the dirt. You're not in the game. You're not getting your butt kicked. You're not getting your nose bloodied. You're not getting hammered, right? Mm-hmm. We have too many people who are at the end of the bench who aren't in the game and rubbing their knees in the ground and pretending like they're in the war of politics and the war of principles and the spiritual warfare that's being involved. And that's what's the problem with our Hispanic community. We need to awaken them to it. And I believe we can if we call them out. And I think that maybe they don't realize it and they need to be awoken.
Mm. I'm so glad you said that because, we're just coming off of a devastating Georgia Senate runoff, right? And a lot of people are very quick to jump in support of the president, which absolutely we need to be very vocal. But when you ask them, have you paid attention to the Senate? Because without the Senate, there's we can have President Trump, another impeachment, but he won't last. Have you paid attention to the Senate? Well, no, I don't. I stay neutral. I care about President Trump. If you really care about President Trump, you really care about those values that he holds, you defend everything that defends him, including the Senate. And it comes down to people who are activists, who are social media influencers, who are just really exposing one side of things, but aren't participating in the other. We just led a group of phenomenal volunteers who were every day and every night phone banking, peer-to-peer texting, door knocking for, the candidates that we thought were going to preserve our values. But because there wasn't enough attention from our own community, we have what we have now. And it's because people sit on the sidelines and say, well, that's not my battle, right? Right. It's sad. But, to kind of wrap it up, do you have hope for the future, Rick? Do you have hope for where America is headed?
My hope never and will never rely on what this world gives. Mm-hmm. It's based on, and my hope is sealed and set by my faith. the anxiety you hear in my voice is not because that I feel like I'm lost. It's for the lost, right? It's not because of my law. I'm not lost. I know where I'm going. I know what my purpose is to glorify God. I'm very set in that. But I realize the opportunity that's given to me every day that God wakes me up, right? And He woke me up. So therefore there is hope. If there was no hope, He wouldn't wake me up. So therefore I have something to do. God isn't a guy that wastes time. He's not waking me up just so I can lollygag today.
Yeah.
There's a war to be done. Get your butt in there and go do it. And don't sit at the end of the bench and rub your knee in the dirt. Get in there and I want to see some bloody noses. I want to see some bruises. And that's what I try to do. So there is hope. But the president, the Trump card, the grassroots activist, Ben Benito, NRA, RNC, there's our cards in our hand, right? They're not the solution. President's not our solution. It's how we, as believers, people who truly believe in these principles, play the card. And instead of playing checkers, we play chess.
Absolutely.
And I hope we start making these chess moves.
Absolutely. I'm so sick and tired of Republicans having to be the ones that come out in defense, right? We're always on the defense. We're never in the offense. And I think it's time Republicans say, let's flip the script a little bit, right? And we have the cards on our side. Let's show them out. I speak to Hispanics all the time through Bienvenido, and a lot of Hispanics feel this call to really get involved. The number one question I ask is, or they ask is, how where do I start? How do I even begin? And I tell them what you told me at our very first Bienvenido event. You pulled me aside, and I was still a little shaky. I didn't know exactly what I was going to speak about, and you said, just tell your story. Just tell what how you love America. And through that story, people will feel a call to action. And till today, that's what Bienvenido is. What is your Bienvenido story? What is the story of America to you? And you don't even have to put the word Republican or Democrat or political in. You just share your story, and people start realizing this is how I fight, by telling my story and telling the truth of how I feel about America. And slowly but surely, your story starts shaking up the hearts of other people and saying, well, your story is like my story. Then I should get involved. Yeah. So what would you tell to young Hispanics who are sitting on the sidelines and saying, okay, it's about time I enter the game?
Start with yourself. You can't change the world when you're messed up. Get your own life in order. Mm-hmm. Get your heart right. If your family's messed up, fix your family. Pour into your family. If your kids, pour into your kids. Find a good woman. Marry her, right? Stay married. Raise godly kids. Pray every day. Yeah. Don't expect people to help you. Those 7 rules aren't changing, and that's so important. And so work in concentric circles, because I believe that truth and opportunity and principles have this aroma. They have this lure, this smell that is so attractive that people want to come to you. You know how many times I get emails from people, and I've spoken for the last 4 years, running for chairman, running for RNC guy. Your 7 principles were so amazing. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, and people they sense that. So one is fix your life, and then tell your story. I'm not proud of what I did in junior high when I rubbed my knee in the dirt, right? But I guarantee you, everybody listening and everybody on the podcast, and you yourself have had those moments. Yeah. Those embarrassing moments where you just faked it. You just walk through it, right? Yeah. I've done that. And those are connectable moments. Those are testimonial moments, because you can't come out pitching this idea that imperfection is its own evangelism tool. Imperfection is how people can. I could never connect with June and Ward Cleaver with a perfect family. I don't know who those people are, and I'm not gonna. But I can connect with a father who's messed up, or a family who struggled, or people who have fought within the family. I connect with those because I've done that. So be honest, tell your story, and use it as a tool. Don't run away from it, right? And so that's such important. So those are the 2 concepts. The third thing is to choose avenues, whether it's with the NRA, Bienvenidos, whether it's RNHA, whatever it is, just choose an avenue. And if it works, great. If it doesn't, don't be resentful. Just back away from it and then choose a different avenue. Yeah. Right. I was blessed to help the president, and as I went through, I didn't get everything I wanted, but I didn't get bitter on it. I just backed away, went a different avenue, right? And so many times, if people go into an organization with these high expectations and they don't get met, there's a resentment and animosity and a callousness, and they don't ever get reengaged. Well, that's just pride.
Yeah.
You know what C.S. Lewis said about pride, right? Lust, gluttony, thievery are flea bites. Pride is what made the devil.
Mm.
And so step beyond your pride and get back engaged in the game.
I love that. Well, Rick, you're a very busy man, NRA board member, chairman of the Texas Department of License and Regulations, and you just have your own business. Which, by the way, you are the number one in Houston, right? Hispanic-owned business in Houston, and what you do, which is wealth management. So you're very busy, but I have a feeling you're only going to get even more busy as politics grow, because you are a leading voice in the Hispanic community. It's such a blessing to know you, to call you friend, to call you mentor, to have you on this podcast. And I'm sure that we're going to have more conversations, and I'm sure everyone listening is going to see way more of you, because we really need more leaders like you, and we need more more community leaders to look up and say, he's doing it, I can do it too. So thank you for encouraging me. Thank you for encouraging everyone to not sit on the sideline, because we don't have the luxury of that anymore. And I hope you come back to the show.
Oh, God bless you. Thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. Well, everyone, muchas gracias for tuning in. I want to remind you that you can listen to the audio version of this episode anywhere you get your podcasts, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Hasta la próxima, amigos. Gracias.